Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Mhm.
Today we are not just looking at ancient history, we are trying to look through it,
That's a good way to put it.
We are challenging this fundamental assumption, really, that when these ancient prophetic texts talk about kings, rulers, empires, figures like Cyrus, Darius, or, the Caesars later on, that they're always talking just about human beings, people sitting on thrones.
Exactly. Yeah, the source material we're looking at today, it really forces a radical reevaluation. I mean, what if the ultimate authority figures in these absolutely pivotal narratives,
Right.
the ones actually determining the rise and fall of nations, what if they're not flesh and blood political leaders,
Right.
but instead these profoundly powerful spiritual entities, angels, some righteous, sure, but maybe many deeply fallen, assigned as like territorial rulers.
Wow. Okay, so this completely transforms the history we read in, say, Daniel and Revelation. It shifts it from just a geopolitical chronicle, dates and battles, into a record of cosmic warfare. We're examining this theological structure that argues the fate of nations is ultimately decided somewhere else, in the unseen realm, by these heavenly princes. And the political actions we see happening down here on Earth are maybe just the visible ripples of that bigger conflict.
That's the core idea. So our deep dive mission today is kind of twofold. First, we need to unpack the core evidence supporting this whole thesis. Mostly we'll be digging into that really stunning narrative in Daniel chapter 10.
Okay.
And second, we want to try and apply this angelic ruler lens to the apocalyptic imagery of Revelation. Specifically, can we use it to help identify the beasts and maybe understand the logistics, let's say, of the final judgment a bit better?
Okay, let's unpack this then. And I guess we have to start where the source material really emphasizes the beginning, right? At that precise moment in Daniel's life, that kind of lays the foundation for this whole idea of spiritual national sovereignty. The 21-day delay.
Yeah, absolutely. To really appreciate the sheer drama of Daniel 10, we first need to set the scene a bit. Establish the chronological backdrop. The sources we're drawing on are very specific about the transition of power that leads up to Daniel's big prayer.
Right, it's all about timing. This timeline seems to center around the fall of Babylon and then the rise of the Persian Empire. So we start with Cyrus, right? He defeats Babylon. That's the famous event in Daniel 5.30.
Correct. But the sources note there's this kind of transitional period right after. Cyrus actually hands over authority specifically over the newly conquered Babylonian territory to this individual named Darius.
Darius. Okay, and this isn't the later Darius, right?
No, different guy. This specific Darius is often identified by historians as Darius the Mede. And the source text clarifies something interesting. It identifies him as Cyrus's maternal uncle and his father-in-law.
Ah, okay. Family ties.
Right. And this marks Darius's first year of rule over just that specific Babylonian territory. Daniel 9.1 mentions this. And that timing, that first year, is absolutely critical.
Okay, why? Why is this first year under Darius so important?
Well, because it's during this specific year, Darius's first, that the angel Gabriel appears to Daniel. And he delivers one of the most significant prophecies in all of Scripture, the huge 70 weeks prophecy. That's detailed in Daniel 9.24.
Wow. Okay.
And our source really emphasizes that while this prophecy, centers on Israel and Jerusalem, its completion, the actual end of those 70 weeks, is somehow intrinsically linked to the end of all human history. It's massive in scope.
So a major prophetic blueprint gets laid down under Darius.
Okay.
Then the timeline moves pretty quickly, doesn't it?
It does. Darius dies just maybe 2 or 3 years later, and then Cyrus begins his own first year as the undisputed king of the whole dominion, everything previously held by Babylon.
Right.
The source points out that, while Cyrus was already a powerful regional king before this is the start of his tenure as the ruler of the entire super empire. He's consolidated everything.
Okay, got it. So we then jump forward to Cyrus's third year of this total rule. Daniel, who by this point must be a pretty old man.
Oh, definitely.
He engages in this period of deep prayer and fasting for 21 days. That's recorded in Daniel 10, verses 1 and 12. And it's only after this period that an angel finally shows up, bringing him a divine message.
And this is where the conventional sort of purely historical reading of prophecy just gets completely shattered. This angel, and his identity is debated, though the source speculates maybe it could be Gabriel again, given his previous visits to Daniel.
Makes sense.
Well, this angel offers a really startling explanation for why he's 3 weeks late. This is the angel's delayed journey, right there in Daniel 10.1213.
3 weeks late for a divine appointment. What's the reason?
The angel basically assures Daniel, look, I was dispatched immediately, literally the very first day you started praying, but he didn't make it straight away. He says he was stopped, detained, resisted for 3 full weeks. By who? By the prince or ruler. The Hebrew word is Tsar of the Kingdom of Persia.
A spiritual roadblock. Seriously. An angel got held up.
Yeah. The messenger angel was detained. The text says he was staying with the kings of Persia, plural, but was blocked by the singular ruler of Persia, unable to break through this opposition until Michael.
Michael the archangel.
The very same,
Right.
who is specifically identified here as one of the chief princes, and crucially, the designated ruler or Tsar of Israel, until Michael came to assist him. Michael's intervention was apparently needed to clear the path for this messenger angel.
Okay, this is huge. This is the hinge point, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is the point where the entire theological structure of our source material really pivots. We have to stop and analyze the nature of this ruler of Persia. I mean, think about it. If a powerful, high-ranking heavenly messenger, an angel, could be stopped, detained, and actually withstood for 21 consecutive days, what kind of force must the resistance be?
Yeah, it logically can't be a human, can it? I mean, no human king, no matter how powerful politically or militarily. Cyrus himself couldn't withstand a divine messenger for 3 weeks. That seems impossible.
Exactly. The source provides really compelling scriptural backup for this exact point. It cites the destruction of the Assyrian army back in 2 Kings 19.35.
What happened there again?
Well, a single angel of the Lord wiped out 185,000 elite Assyrian soldiers. In one night, gone.
Wow, okay.
So if just one angel possesses that kind of, well, destructive power, the idea that the human King Cyrus, or any of his generals, could physically detain a high-ranking messenger angel for 21 days,
Yeah?
it just becomes absurd, doesn't it?
Completely. So the conclusion seems inescapable then. According to this interpretation, the ruler of Persia who successfully fought and delayed this angel must itself be a powerful spiritual entity. An angel, or probably a fallen one, assigned somehow to govern and, well, corrupt the Persian nation from the spiritual side.
Right. And this instantly elevates the political tension we see between, say, Israel and Persia in the Bible into something much bigger. It becomes a reflection of a true cosmic war.
So the scene in Daniel 10, it actually reveals 3 distinct rulers or princes, these Sarim operating in this kind of celestial hierarchy.
That's right. You've got, first, the ruler of Persia acting as this fallen barrier, the opposition.
Okay.
Second, the visiting angel, the righteous messenger, the one who got blocked.
Right.
And third, Michael, the ruler of Israel, specifically identified as a chief prince who had to come and assist in the fight.
What's really fascinating there, though, is that the same term ruler or prince, Tsar, is applied to both the righteous Michael and the fallen entity holding sway over Persia.
Yeah, that's a key point. It suggests that these entities, even the fallen ones, are operating under some kind of recognized, even if it's now corrupted, system of territorial jurisdiction. They still hold a title of rulership.
And this conflict, it wasn't just a one-off skirmish just to get a message delivered, was it?
Yeah.
The angel's mission wasn't over once he talked to Daniel.
Not at all. In Daniel 10, verse 20, after he delivers the prophecy, which, by the way, the source notes is information drawn from something called the writing of truth.
The writing of truth. What's that?
We'll get into that more, but basically this pre-existing divine record. Anyway, after delivering the message from it, the angel says he has to return immediately to fight the Persian ruler again. The battle continues.
Wow. Okay. So round 2.
And then right after that, we get this foreshadowing of the next great empire. He adds that after he's finished battling the Prince of Persia, implying he expects to win eventually, then the ruler of Greece will come.
Greece. Alexander the Great's empire.
Exactly. So this establishes a really clear, sequential, angelic conflict that perfectly mirrors the sequential rise and fall of earthly empires we see in history. Babylon gave way to Persia, Persia would give way to Greece, and so on.
So the framework being proposed here is that the shift in human geopolitical power, the fall of Persia to Alexander the Great's Greek Empire, that was just the visible earthly outcome of a prior successful celestial battle. A battle where the angelic ruler of Persia was defeated, making way for the angelic ruler of Greece to take over that spiritual territory.
That's the implication. It reframes the whole thing.
I think it's also crucial that the angel mentioned he was detained while, quote, staying with the kings of Persia, plural. But he was fought by the ruler of Persia, singular. That detail seems to strongly support this core thesis, doesn't it?
It does. It suggests the physical kings and their whole administration, they are the human proxies, maybe the visible instruments on the ground, while the spiritual ruler is the unseen mind, the entity controlling the entire national trajectory from behind the scenes.
This hierarchy is really what matters then. The source connects this back to the New Testament too, doesn't it? Pointing out how even Pontius Pilate, who seemed like the ultimate earthly authority in Judea,
Right.
Jesus reminds him in John 19:10, "You would have no power over me unless it had been given you from above."
And that's the key. Whether that authority ultimately descends from a righteous source, like Michael over Israel, or a wicked source, like this Prince of Persia, human power is always depicted as subservient to some higher spiritual mandate or permission.
So if we really accept this interpretation, then the rise and fall of every major power we study in history class, from Babylon to Persia, Greece, Rome, maybe even beyond, it's fundamentally a record of territorial warfare between these high-level angels. It's kind of a terrifying thought, but also maybe a thrilling rereading of global history.
It definitely changes how you look at things.
Okay, so building on this really dramatic evidence from Daniel 10, let's move into the core thesis itself. But before we fully jump there, maybe we should touch on that phrase you mentioned, the writing of truth. What's the significance of that?
Yeah, that's important context. The source interprets this writing of truth not just as, something the angel happened to know, but as potentially an ancient divine text, something that predates human documentation, maybe even, as the source speculates, a kind of scripture of angels.
A scripture of angels. Wow.
Yeah. The idea is that Daniel's subsequent writing, what becomes our scripture in the book of Daniel, only becomes human scripture because he was made privy to a portion of this pre-existing, divinely authored celestial script. It emphasizes that what Daniel recorded wasn't just a spontaneous prediction, but more like a documented segment of the angelic master plan, or at least the part relevant to humanity.
So we're essentially looking at a revealed section of the divine operating manual, so to speak.
Okay.
Understanding that helps because it seems to allow the source to make this really critical leap, connecting these specific angelic rulers we saw in Daniel 10 to the broader, more symbolic, apocalyptic figures in Daniel 7.
Exactly. Daniel 7, that's the chapter with the infamous vision of the 4 monstrous beasts that rise up sequentially from the sea.
Right, the lion with eagle's wings, the bear, the leopard with 4 wings, and that terrifying 4th beast with iron teeth.
Those ones. And later in that same chapter, Daniel 7, verse 17, they are explicitly identified as representing 4 kings, which in turn are said to represent 4 kingdoms or nations.
Okay, so the Bible itself links the beasts to kings and kingdoms.
Correct. Now, you synthesize that with the conclusion from Daniel 10. If the ruler of Persia kingdom is indeed an angel,
As Daniel 10 strongly suggests.
and the beasts of Daniel 7 represent kings and their subsequent nations in succession, well, then the logical conclusion, according to the source material we're examining, is that these 4 beasts are, in essence, 4 powerful angels controlling those corresponding global empires: Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome.
So the beasts aren't just abstract symbols of political systems like, tyranny versus democracy or something. They are the actual spiritual entities who established, governed, and maybe even embodied those systems on a spiritual level. They are, potentially, Satan's chief territorial proxies, governing vast segments of human civilization throughout history.
That's the radical interpretation being put forward, and it helps establish this detailed, though definitely layered, hierarchy of power in the universe, as understood by our source material.
Okay, can you walk us through that hierarchy? How does it stack up?
Sure. At the very, very top, of course, is the ultimate sovereign, God, the Most High, who, as Daniel 4.32 says, reigns over the kingdoms of men and gives them to whoever he wills, determining their tenure. Absolute authority.
Okay, God the Father at the pinnacle.
Then, beneath the Father, you have the resurrected Christ,
Yeah.
the second person of the Godhead, now governing all creation. Ephesians 1.2022 describes him as being vested with all authority, having all principalities, powers, dominions put beneath his feet after his resurrection and ascension.
Right, all authority in heaven and on earth.
Exactly. And then, beneath Christ, this is where it gets interesting based on Daniel 10, the national rulers, the true authorities influencing human governments, are seen as these angels.
Okay.
Now, if these national angels are righteous, like Michael over Israel, presumably they guide their nations toward God's will, or at least protect them according to God's plan. But if they're fallen, like the ruler of Persia seemed to be,
Then they're actively working against God's will.
precisely, they are actively influencing the earthly kings and the human governments they control, steering them towards rebellion, corruption, idolatry, whatever serves their dark purposes.
So it's like a cascading system of influence. The fallen angel influences or controls the earthly king or government, who in turn controls the people under them. It could almost be an explanation for why sometimes human political figures seem to act so irrationally or against even their own long-term interests. Maybe they're being influenced by a wicked higher authority pulling the strings.
That's certainly one implication drawn from this interpretation, and again, that reference back to Pilate. It reminds us that human power, no matter how absolute it seems on earth, is always conditional. It operates only under a higher spiritual authorization, whether that authorization comes from God or potentially from a delegated, even if rebellious, angelic power.
What's still a bit challenging, though, is the terminology used in Daniel. The term ruler or prince, Tsar, is applied even to the opposing fallen entities, like the Prince of Persia. Why would righteous angels, or the scriptural text itself, continue to accord them this title of rulership?
That's a really insightful question. The source suggests it might imply that even in their rebellion, these fallen angels retain some aspect of their original foundational jurisdictional authority. The authority perhaps given to them at creation, maybe over certain territories or functions.
So they're still rulers in some sense, even if they're now wicked rulers misusing their position.
Possibly. It could be a recognition of their inherent rank or original divine mandate, even as they completely abuse it. It highlights the complexity of the spiritual realm.
And this whole concept of high-level angelic conflict, it's not totally isolated to Daniel 10, is it? The source brings up another example.
Right. It reminds us of the precedent found in the book of Jude, verse 9, where Michael the archangel is described as engaging in a dispute, a conflict, directly with the devil himself over the body of Moses.
Ah, right, over Moses' body. Why were they fighting over that?
The text doesn't give all the details, but the point is you see this high-level angelic contest happening. Michael versus Satan. These are powerful, high-stakes conflicts over things with both physical and spiritual significance. It shows this kind of angelic struggle is part of the biblical worldview.
So this framework, this idea of angelic national rulers, it gives a potentially very literal interpretation to that famous verse in Ephesians 6:12, doesn't it? Where Paul says our struggle is not against flesh and blood.
Exactly. But against, quote, principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, and spiritual wickedness in high places.
If those rulers of the darkness are literally the angelic princes of Persia and princes of Greece and whoever else, then maybe every human conflict, every border dispute, every election, every change in regime, maybe it's simply the physical skirmish reflecting that much deeper, unseen celestial warfare.
That's the profound implication for understanding history and even current events. If this interpretation holds, then the national identity, the character, the trajectory of every major power today might still be in some fundamental way dictated by a corresponding angelic ruler, perhaps fallen, perhaps still fighting. We could be watching the outcomes of a struggle we can't even see, driven by these incredibly powerful spiritual entities seeking territorial dominion over nations.
It's a massive thought. And this logic, it seems to successfully bridge the gap between the historical narrative we see in Daniel and the future apocalyptic visions, which I guess leads us directly into the ultimate conflict described in the book of Revelation. Okay, so if the great kings and kingdoms of Daniel, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome were ultimately ruled by these angelic serum, then we really have to apply that same lens when we look at the end-time powers described in Revelation, right?
Logically, yes. We need to see if it fits. And the source begins with the one figure in Revelation whose identity as an angel is already explicitly confirmed. The dragon.
The dragon.
Right.
Revelation 20, verse 2, flat out identifies the dragon as Satan, the devil, that ancient serpent.
Correct. And drawing also on Ezekiel 28, verse 14, which many interpret as referring to Satan's origin, he's identified as an angelic being, specifically a cherub, a very high-ranking one.
Okay, so the dragon is definitely an angel, a fallen one, Satan himself. Now, Revelation 13, verse 2 says that the dragon gives his power, his seat, and great authority to the beast that rises from the sea. So this raises the critical question based on our Daniel framework. If the ultimate source of the sea beast's power is an angel, the dragon Satan, could the sea beast itself, the primary recipient of that power, also be an angel, maybe receiving jurisdiction from a superior fallen entity like Satan?
That's the question this interpretation forces us to ask. And this brings us to the source's really crucial and quite detailed definition of the end-time coalition of powers. It lays out a specific structure identifying the main antagonists.
Okay, let's hear it.
Number 1, the red beast. This is identified in this view as the world beast government. Think of it as the final global political system that will enforce end-time policies, the governmental structure itself.
Oh, Red Beast is world government system. Got it.
Number 2, the harlot of Babylon. This entity is identified by the source specifically as the Roman papacy. It emphasizes what it sees as its Babylonian origins and characteristics, sometimes terming it the Babylonian Roman papacy.
Right. So harlot papacy.
And number 3, the sea beast. This is seen as the unified system that emerges when the red beast, the world government, is actively controlled and symbolically ridden by the harlot, the papacy.
Ah, okay. So the sea beast isn't separate. It's a composite.
Exactly. It represents this merged entity, the super Babylonian Roman papacy, where the dominant religious authority is effectively controlling the global political structure. The source also equates this composite power, the sea beast system, with the figure known as the son of destruction.
Wow. Okay. That's a very specific and frankly huge claim, identifying the sea beast, which is the dominant end-time persecuting power, as the papacy controlling a world government.
Yeah.
What's the source's scriptural justification for linking the harlot specifically to the Roman papacy? That's obviously a very controversial interpretation.
It is. The source primarily relies on several key symbolic elements described in Revelation chapter 17. For instance, the woman, the harlot, is described as sitting on 7 hills.
Which is famously associated with the city of Rome.
Historically, yes, that's a common connection made. Furthermore, she's seen dressed in purple and scarlet colors, often associated with high religious office, and she's depicted as being drunk with the blood of the saints, which interpreters who hold this view connect to historical periods of persecution attributed to the church based in Rome.
Okay, so based on those symbols, the hills, the colors, the persecution aspect, the source identifies the harlot as the papal system. And the sea beast is when that system takes control of the global political red beast.
That's the structure presented. So the sea beast represents this final, terrifying fusion of global political power and a dominant religious ideology, an entity whose ultimate goal is global control and persecution of dissenters.
But this power structure, this harlot riding the beast, it doesn't last indefinitely, does it? The source talks about an internal conflict erupting during the last 7 years of history, the final week from Daniel's prophecy.
That's right. The chronology seems to split again within those final 7 years. During the first half of that final week, the first 3.5 years, the harlot is dominant. The source suggests the super papacy successfully controls the world beast government during this initial phase.
Okay.
But then, at the midpoint of the 7 years specifically, the source suggests, after the devastating 7 plagues begin to fall, a really radical and violent shift occurs.
A shift? What happens?
The power dynamics completely flip.
Yeah.
The red beast, the world government system, along with its 10 horns.
The 10 horns.
The source interprets these 10 horns, which are mentioned alongside the beast, as representing 10 kings or perhaps 10 major power blocks, key components within that world government structure.
Okay.
Well, this red beast system and its 10 horns will suddenly turn against the harlot, the religious power that was previously controlling them. Revelation 17.1 scene describes it graphically. They will hate the harlot, destroy her, strip her naked, symbolically eat her flesh, and utterly consume her, burning her with fire.
Wow. So the political system violently throws off and destroys the religious system that was riding it.
Exactly. It's portrayed as more than just a policy disagreement. It's a total violent rejection and annihilation of the religious authority that previously held the reins.
Okay, but this internal war, this massive turnaround, this forces us right back to the angelic thesis, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If the red beast is an organization potentially controlled by one fallen angel, or reflecting its character, and the harlot is controlled by another, or reflects its character, does this mean fallen angels are now fighting each other, the political angel versus the religious angel?
And that is where we hit this massive potential contradiction, which the source material grapples with directly. If Satan's kingdom is supposed to be fundamentally unified to be effective, as Jesus himself suggested.
Right. A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. Luke 11:17.
Exactly. How can this internal war, the destruction of what seemed like a highly powerful and successful religious arm of control, the harlot by the political arm, the red beast, be justified within a unified demonic strategy? This leads us to the 3 main viewpoints or possibilities that the source analyzes to try and resolve this.
Okay, what are the options?
View 1 is what you just suggested. Separate angels fighting. This view assumes the red beast entity system and the harlot entity system are indeed controlled by separate, powerful, fallen angels. If they genuinely fight each other to the point of annihilation, Well, this seems to violate that principle Jesus stated. Such a fundamental collapse of unity within Satan's hierarchy should logically signal the end, or at least a critical weakening, of the entire dominion of darkness. But that clearly hasn't happened yet at this point in the prophetic timeline. The beast power continues afterwards.
Yeah, that seems problematic. And I have to ask, even if they could fight, why would they? If the harlot, the religious system, was proving to be a profitable, highly effective tool for global control and persecution, why would Satan just allow his political arm to destroy it? Does the religious component suddenly become expendable? It seems counterintuitive.
That very question leads directly into view 2. A single angel executing a unified strategy. This is perhaps the interpretation the source leans towards more heavily. It suggests that maybe it's not two separate angelic powers in conflict. Instead, perhaps one single ultimate fallen angel, maybe Satan himself, or perhaps the specific powerful angel controlling the final Antichrist entity, is actually orchestrating both organizations, both the political red beast and the religious harlot.
Okay, so one mastermind behind both. How does that explain the destruction then?
Under this view, the destruction of the harlot isn't actually a civil war within the demonic ranks. It's a calculated strategic maneuver orchestrated from the top.
A maneuver. Why would the mastermind destroy one of its own major tools?
The thinking here, as presented in the source, is that the harlot, the religious element, is primarily a tool used during the early phase of the end times. Its purpose is maybe to exploit religious sentiment, create a false sense of unity, and help consolidate political control under the banner of the Red Beast.
Okay, like using religion to gain power initially.
Right. But once that global unity is sufficiently achieved and the political system, the Red Beast, is fully established and ready for its final, purely secular, totalitarian, and perhaps openly satanic phase, the harlot's usefulness expires. She's served her purpose.
So the religious mask comes off.
Essentially, the single controlling fallen angel then uses the political arm, the Red Beast and its 10 horns, to deliberately dismantle and destroy the now redundant religious arm, the harlot. This ensures a final, unadulterated system of control that is purely materialistic, political, and perhaps overtly anti-religious, ready for the final confrontation.
Okay, so in this view, the single angel uses the Red Beast system to destroy the harlot system. This maintains the coherence of Satan's kingdom, because the destruction is commanded from the top as part of a larger plan. It's not infighting.
Correct. It preserves the unity of command. Now, the source also acknowledges a third possibility, view 3, purely political conflict on a human level, meaning the battle is fundamentally just a geopolitical power struggle, a fight for ultimate global hegemony between the world government apparatus, Red Beast, and the dominant papal power structure, harlot, playing out entirely on the human stage. While fallen angels are certainly influencing everything behind the scenes, as Ephesians 2.1 suggests they influence the sons of disobedience,
Right.
the actual burning of the harlot by the beast is seen primarily as a conventional, albeit incredibly catastrophic political event, a secular power finally crushing a religious one that got too powerful or became inconvenient.
This view 3 kind of brings us back to the initial question, though. Is the spiritual entity the beast harlot, or does it just control the human organization? Because if the destruction of the harlot is literal fire, she's burned with fire, and the harlot organization is controlled by an angel, it seems most consistent with view 2, doesn't it? That the human physical organization, the papacy's global structure and influence, is what is physically consumed by fire, while the controlling angelic entity simply moves on, its strategy shifting to command the next purely political phase through the Red Beast.
I think that aligns well. It parallels the Daniel 10 situation, too. The conflict between the ruler of Persia and the ruler of Greece was primarily a celestial duel between angels, which then had earthly consequences. The destruction of the harlot, however, seems to be portrayed more as a spiritual command being executed through a human political mechanism, the Red Beast government and its allies.
And we mustn't forget those 10 horns in this, those 10 kings or power blocks that cooperate with the Red Beast in destroying the harlot. They must be part of that strategic move in view 2. It shows that the global political powers at this point are all unified in turning against the religious dominance they previously tolerated or were subject to.
Yes, their cooperation is key evidence for a coordinated shift, rather than just random chaos. The complexity of applying these spiritual identities to what look like very political structures is immense, absolutely. But that unified command interpretation, view 2, seems to best resolve the apparent internal conflict while still upholding the core angelic thesis that these powerful spiritual rulers are ultimately pulling the strings behind major world events.
Okay, So with the harlot system now violently dismantled and gone, only the world beast government, the red beast system, and its partner, the false prophet, who performs signs and wonders to make people worship the beast, remain as the primary antagonists on the world stage. And this then leads directly to their swift judgment.
Right. And the sequence of this final judgment, as laid out primarily in Revelation chapters 19 and 20, creates what might be the ultimate theological puzzle for the source material we're examining, mostly because of the specific time-stamped gap of 1,000 years.
Okay, let's just quickly review that established sequence of judgment events again, as the source lays it out from Revelation.
Please do.
Okay, step 1. The harlot, the papal system in this view, is destroyed and burned by the red beast, the world government. That happens presumably around the midpoint of the final 7 years, maybe triggered by the plagues.
Correct.
Step 2. Then at the end of the 7 years, at Christ's return, the red beast, world government system leader, and the false prophet are captured. They're immediately thrown alive into the lake of fire. That's Revelation 19.20.
Alive, that's a key detail.
Step 3. After the beast and false prophet are in the lake of fire, the devil, the dragon, Satan's self, is then bound and imprisoned in the abyss for 1,000 years. The millennium begins. Step 4. Only after the 1,000 years are over, Satan is released for a short time, leads a final rebellion, is defeated, and then he is finally thrown into the lake of fire. Crucially, the text says, where the beast and the false prophet already are, and they will all be tormented there forever and ever. That's Revelation 20.10.
Exactly. And it's the fact that the red beast and the false prophet are apparently in the fire pit being tormented for a full 1,000 years before the devil even joins them, that creates this massive, almost unavoidable dilemma for interpretation. The question is, what physical or spiritual entity identified as the red beast is actively burning and being tormented during that entire millennium?
Okay, yeah, I see the problem. Before we try to tackle that directly, maybe we should clarify the setting of the millennium itself. Where and what is it according to the source?
Good point. The source connects the establishment of the new heaven and new earth, mentioned in Revelation 21, directly with this 1,000-year kingdom, the millennium. It sees them as essentially the same period and place. This kingdom is also sometimes referred to conceptually as paradise, or perhaps echoing Paul's experience, the third heaven made manifest.
So the millennium happens on the new earth.
That's the view presented. But, crucially, the old creation has to be cleared out first. Before this new earth can emerge and host the 1,000-year kingdom, the first heaven and the first earth, which the source identifies pretty straightforwardly as our physical planet Earth itself, are described as being completely destroyed by fire. Peter talks about this, 2 Peter 3.2. The heavens passing away with a roar, the elements melting with intense heat, the earth and its works being burned up.
Okay, so the entire current physical planet is consumed by heat, transformed before the new earth appears for the millennium. That's a critical prerequisite.
Absolutely critical, because it feeds directly into the most complex and maybe problematic view of the red beast's identity when we consider what's burning in the lake of fire. But first, let's just revisit the core question. What entity specifically identified as the red beast is literally burning in the lake of fire for over 1,000 years?
Okay, let's look at the options the source considers. Let's view number 1.
Viewda. The red beast is the world beast government, the political system itself.
Okay.
Now, the source struggles with the implications here. If the red beast is primarily the global governmental system, what exactly is burning for a millennium? Does an abstract political structure, an Elism, or an organization chart feel torment? Can it be thrown in alive?
Probably not.
Right. So does it mean the lake of fire is specifically holding the individual human political leaders, the dictators, the functionaries, the enforcers who actually ran that world government?
That seems more plausible, maybe.
Possibly. If it's the latter, the politicians, then the focus shifts from the beast as a singular system to the beast being a metonymy, a collective term for the specific condemned humans who embodied and ran it. But then why refer to them collectively and singularly as the beast being tormented rather than just saying the wicked rulers? And if it's the former, if it's somehow the abstract system itself burning, well, that stretches the definition of being tormented forever in a conscious way.
Yeah, trying to make that tangible is hard. If the world beast government is burning, does that mean, like, the UN building is eternally on fire? Or just the abstract idea of global tyranny is somehow suffering? It feels metaphorical, but the text says alive and tormented. If it's the people, the collective term beast still feels a bit awkward for individual humans. So this view seems difficult to maintain if we take the text about being alive and tormented literally for a singular entity.
Agreed. Which leads to view, Da. The red beast is the angel controlling the world government. This is the interpretation that seems most consistent with the whole Daniel 10 thesis we've been discussing. If the red beast isn't just the human system, but fundamentally the powerful fallen angel who established, empowered, and controlled that world government, well, then that angel is captured at Christ's return and cast bodily or spiritually into the fire pit. And that specific angel is tormented for over 1,000 years, waiting for his ultimate boss, the devil, to join him.
This view seems to fit the idea that the ultimate judgment falls on the spiritual authorities behind the wickedness, right? It maintains consistency with the Daniel narrative that these powerful angels are the true kings or rulers being judged and punished.
It does seem the most theologically coherent with the overall framework. It directly judges the spiritual authority that fueled the earthly tyranny. It also potentially explains how the entity can be cast in a libation. Angels are living spiritual beings and remain consciously tormented for that duration. The main difficulty here, perhaps, is just conceiving of an angelic being suffering what sounds like physical torment by fire for such an incredibly long time. But the text seems to indicate it.
So this view, too, seems the strongest theologically within this framework, as it targets the spiritual power behind the throne, so to speak. It explains the alive aspect and the torment.
It appears so, but then we have to consider the third and perhaps most radical interpretation the source mentions. View A. The red beast is the earth itself.
The planet Earth, how does that work?
This is the most unconventional view. It draws heavily on that idea we just discussed that the current Earth is destined to be destroyed by fire, as Peter described.
Okay.
The argument essentially goes something like this. Since the Earth is consumed by fire at the end of this age, and the lake of fire is the ultimate place of fiery destruction, maybe the term red beast being thrown into the lake of fire is symbolically identifying the physical planet Earth itself being subjected to this process of fiery judgment and everlasting destruction.
Wow. So the planet is the beast being judged.
In this specific radical interpretation, yes. The planet that hosted rebellion is itself judged.
But wait. This interpretation seems to create a massive, contradictory timeline problem, doesn't it? Especially regarding the location of the 1,000-year kingdom.
Exactly. You spotted it. This is the major stumbling block for view 3. If the earth is the beast and it's burning in the lake of fire before and during the millennium,
then the 1,000-year kingdom, which the source identifies with the new earth, cannot logically take place on earth, can it?
Yeah.
Revelation 21.1 explicitly says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away."
Precisely. The new heaven and new earth are supposed to be the location of that millennial kingdom. If the planet itself is the beast simultaneously being tormented in the lake of fire throughout that same period, the logistics become completely impossible under this view. The millennium would have to be somewhere else entirely, contradicting the idea of it being on a renewed earth.
Okay, so the stakes in figuring out the beast's identity here are enormous. It's not just academic. If the beast is the planet, view 3, then the whole location and nature of the millennium has to be rethought, or the timeline of destruction is fundamentally misunderstood. If the beast is just a political system, view 1, the nature of the judgment feels ambiguous or metaphorical. But if the beast is the controlling angel, view 2, then the judgment is clear and personal, and the new earth location for the millennium remains perfectly viable after the old earth passes away.
That sums up the dilemma perfectly. And the preference within the source material, while it responsibly explores all three possibilities, does seem to lean fairly strongly towards the angelic interpretation. View 2. It argues that the judgment described in Revelation is ultimately, and most fittingly, levied against the primary spiritual authorities who commanded and empowered the earthly systems of wickedness.
So, just as the angelic ruler Persia was the true underlying enemy, Daniel's messenger had to fight back in Daniel's time.
So, the angelic ruler of the final world beast government is the true underlying enemy being judged first in Revelation's time. It provides a consistent framework.
A very consistent framework, actually. The spiritual conflict that began, or at least was revealed in the context of Persia and Greece, it escalates throughout history, culminating in this final, powerful fallen angel controlling the red beast system. And that angel is the first of the major spiritual entities thrown into eternal torment. The physical system he controls is used to burn the harlot first, and then the angel himself is judged personally, burning for a millennium before his ultimate master, the devil, finally joins him in that same fate.
And the source confirms the chilling conclusion from the text. regardless of which specific view one lands on whether the beast is ultimately understood as an angel, a collection of politicians, or even symbolically as the planet, its final destination described in Revelation is unquestionably a place of eternal suffering and torment. The judgment is certain, and for the beast and the false prophet, it has already begun 1,000 years before the devil's final sentence is carried out.
We have certainly charted a complex and frankly mind-bending journey today. From a 21-day spiritual skirmish in the court of King Cyrus, all the way to 1,000 years of burning torment in the cosmic lake of fire. #outro.
Absolutely. And the core concept we've deep dived into today, it really fundamentally challenges our everyday perception of power, doesn't it? It strongly suggests that national governments, symbolized by these great empires, both ancient and maybe even modern, are not just human constructs. They are, at a deeper level, spiritual battlegrounds, ruled, influenced, perhaps even embodied by these powerful, territorial, angelic entities, many of whom, the text suggests, are deeply fallen and working against divine purposes.
Yeah, these spiritual rulers, these Sarim, acting almost like the hidden infrastructure of global politics, orchestrating geopolitical shifts from behind the curtain, determining which kingdom rises and which one falls based on their own celestial battles and agendas. It makes the apocalyptic beasts of Revelation feel less like just metaphors for general tyranny and more like the ultimate terrifying expression of global systems completely controlled by these high-ranking spiritual potentates.
It really forces us, or at least invites us, to look beyond the daily headlines, doesn't it? To consider that the political struggles, the trade wars, the military conflicts events we typically view as purely human outcomes driven by economics or ideology or just sheer ambition might actually be, in some cases, nothing more than the physical ripples, the surface foam of much older, much deeper, and largely hidden battles taking place among these spiritual rulers vying for territorial control over humanity.
That narrative back in Daniel 10 really is the key that unlocks this perspective, isn't it? A high-ranking heavenly angel on a mission from God was literally detained for 3 whole weeks by the spiritual ruler of Persia, a delay that significantly impacted the delivery of a crucial prophecy for Daniel and for history. It just compels you to consider the scale and the reality of spiritual warfare constantly impacting our lives and potentially the entire trajectory of our civilization.
And you have to wonder if the fate of a world empire like Persia and the precise timing of God's prophetic revelation could be affected by the outcome of a 21-day spiritual skirmish between angels over a single prophet's prayer. Well, imagine the magnitude of the spiritual battles that might be occurring right now, unseen, over major global organizations, influential ideologies, and contemporary world powers today.
It certainly leaves you with a provocative thought. This source material gives us a framework, a lens, through which to consider the possibility that the greatest powers on Earth, the ones truly shaping our daily existence and global policy, may not, in the final analysis, be human at all.
A challenging thought indeed. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into what we could call the cosmic geopolitics of prophecy and sovereignty.
Yeah, thank you for exploring this with us. We hope this perspective, drawn from these interpretations, gives you something new to consider the next time you hear about a major national conflict or maybe a sudden, inexplicable shift in global policy. What might be happening behind the scenes?
Until next time, keep digging.